Is I walk you through the whole set of tables, I walk you through the whole set of numbers. I told you that the table is the easiest way to remember and explain TOCA, but I told you I'm going to show you the PPC version. Okay, the PPC version is more compact. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to show the same things that we discussed last week on the PPC. Okay? So, let me So, from a PPC's perspective, we're going to have US, we're going to have China, okay? And then we're obviously going to have wheat, cloth, wheat. Okay. I give you something to do first. I give just 2 minutes, 3 minutes, okay? You think about how the PPC might look like. So let's draw the PPC line and label whatever you can label in pencil in case it's wrong. Okay? So you can just draw this in pen or whatever, and then you can draw your lines in pencil. And then you try to translate the information that's here onto this as best as you can. So just draw a line and then put in labels and see what you come up with. Ready? Need a minute? Okay, so let me backtrack a bit, right? What does PPC normally look like? Looks like this, right? Do anyone remember why a PPC looks like that? Why does a PPC look like that? Because it just looks like that, isn't it? The PPC looks like that because of rising up cost. Okay, so it's a concave shape. So what the ordinary PPC tells you is that initially if I produce a little bit more B, I just sacrifice a bit of A. If I want to produce a lot more B, I'll have to sacrifice a lot more A. So you can see that this is bigger than that. So that's what I mean by rising up cost. That's an ordinary PPC. It doesn't have to look like this. But it normally does because the rising up cost assumption makes sense. Now, in trade, if you come back to this table makes a very crucial assumption. The assumption is that the up cost is constant. So your PPC should not be concave. Your PPC will be a straight line. Okay? So for US, it will look like this. And for China, it will look like that. Okay? Constant op cost. So the gradient will represent the op cost, right? So in this case, the gradient will be minus 1.67. And then the gradient here will be. Okay, so of course, if you put it in a graph form and you talk about gradient, then you can only show one of the two values. Right? Because gradient is rise over run. So you can only show it from one perspective, dy over dx. You can't show it the other way around. Okay? So the gradient represents the op cost. So the gradient, the op cost is constant. That's a key assumption here. Okay? So that's where it looks different from a normal PPC. Now, the next thing we want to fill in is of course the intercepts. Right, the intercepts with the x and y axis. Right? Anyone knows what the values for the US one is? What are the values will be? Chloe? Again? 110 and 54. Okay. Let's hold that first. Any other suggestions? Any other suggestions?
137.
How do you get 137 week? And so what was this?
Oh yeah, I'm looking at
What's this number?
I was looking at China.
Oh, okay.
200 and
200? And
100.
why?
So you assume that there's equal.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing, the first understanding you need to have is actually nothing to do with the trait diagram. It has to do with what does this point mean on a PPC. So it means that you only produce this one thing, right? When you are here, mathematically when you read, this point is 200, is 0 at 200. Because the x-axis is 0, the y-axis is 200. So that means you're only producing wheat. Then this intercept, you're only producing cloth. So then the question is, how do we know that these two are the numbers? Then it comes back to our initial assumption, that these pair of numbers, we assume 50-50 split in FOP. So we know that the max that the country can produce will be double or whatever numbers are here. So say for China, this will be 10 and that will be 20. Make sense so far? And the next thing we can put in would be the original production, which we know will be at the midpoint. So this will be 100 and that will be 60. That will be 5 and that will be at 10. Okay so far? So the things I told you are the key characteristics. Important to note down, okay? Important to remember. Because if you're going to use the PPC version for your part A, you've got to explain all of these things. Right? You've got to say, oh, why is this 200? Why is this 120? What do they mean? Why is your PPC a straight line? What's the gradient? And stuff like that. Okay? Now, so what we have drawn so far basically captures the information in the first two tables already. Okay, what we need to do next is to go on to table 3. For China, it's quite straightforward. China does full specialization. So basically, China moves from this point to this point. Okay? The US will only partially specialize, so they'll move to a point that we will have to draw in. A point like this, and it'll be 110 and 54. Okay? And so of course, if you get two countries that are more comparable in terms of output, then if they both fully specialize, then you expect one to go towards the x-axis and the other one to go fully towards the y-axis. But in my example, because it's partial specialization, we're only going to move a bit. Okay? Now, the last thing we want to show is the final traded amount, like the final amount that they're actually consuming. Okay? So if we try to reflect that, then 164 for the US will be at a point like this. This will be 64. Okay, it's not super to scale, but you get the idea. Okay? So there will be a point like that. And then for China, it will be 10 and 10. So they will be here. Okay? This is a simple graph reading, graph structure. Now, the first thing I want to draw to your attention is this. Last week I told you that, well, our set of tables proves the two fundamental pillars in the T of CA, the theory of comparative advantage, which is that when you specialize according to your CA and you trade according to it, right, you've increased global production and consumption. So that's great for the world, right? That's great in terms of consumer utility, you get to consume more, it's good for from a GDP perspective as well, from an output perspective and so on. Alright? Now, what is more significant is if you observe the points that we have drawn in, not only is consumption more than before, but countries are able to consume beyond their PPC. That's really, really important. Right? That tells you that trade gives you an outcome that's otherwise unattainable for a country on its own. And that is the clearest sign that free trade is supposed to raise standard of living and utility if we get this outcome that we see over here. Okay? Consumption beyond your PPC You have attained a combination of goods and services that was otherwise not possible, even if you max out everything that you want to make. Okay? And that's a really, really big deal. Okay, that's not all to the diagram actually. We need to draw one more line in. Okay? And the line that we need to draw in is called the trading line. Okay, so let me tell you the idiot-proof way to draw it first. Okay? Then I'll tell you the philosophy behind it. Okay? So to draw the trading line, you go to the maximum quantity of what the country can produce. Okay? You go to the maximum quantity that the country can produce. So in this, the maximum quantity of what the country has a CA in. So in China's case, it will be cloth, and then you draw a line out like that. Okay, it will have to cut through the cross. I'll tell you why later. Okay. Same for US. Although US only produces 110, but the maximum is at 200. So we're going to start from here. I'm going to draw a line down. Okay. So that's the idiot-proof way. You go to what you have a CA in, and then you draw a line up. And the line up, when it touches the axis, right, it must be more than what you had previously. Okay, so you can see that in China's case, it will exceed 10 wheat. In US case, it will exceed 120 cloth. First things first. Let's try to figure out what the intercepts are again. What do you think is the intercept here for China for wheat? $20. Good. Why? Must be, you see, because I draw my scale, it looks like it's 20, right? Why is it 20? Try that. I mean, since you got the answer, then tell me, what do you think is 20? If it's 20, that means the gradient is minus 1. Right? What's the significance of the minus 1? How to look at the after trade table? But we don't know whether that's a 50-50 assumption, right? That's what you're saying, right? So it's not that. Okay, so the reason why I say the gradient is the key is because the gradient is now minus 1. Right? Means what? Means wheat to cloth, the ratio is 1:1. Why? Because when we traded, our assumption was they can trade for 1 wheat for 1 cloth. So the trading line's gradient reflects the terms of trade between the two countries. So for the US, this will be 200. And that's why the blue line has to pass through the cross, right, the new point. So what the trading line shows you is that, well, technically they don't, at this trading ratio, they don't necessarily have to trade 10 for 10. They can trade 10 for 15 for 15, 12 for 12, 5 for 5, 8 for 8, whatever. So you've got a variety of outcomes. So what the trading line tells you is, given this trading ratio, right, these are the different combinations of goods and services you can go for. Which is why we start from the CA point and we draw a line up. Because we're trying to say that if China only produces 20 cloth, 20 cloth, and they can trade 1:1. So the way they can consume is 20, 0, 19, 1, 18, 2, 17, 3, so on and so forth, all the way until 0, 20. For the US it's the same, except that in this setup, because of my assumption regarding China's numbers, there are some parts of this trading line that's not attainable for the US, simply because China doesn't produce enough. Okay? So having said that, the gradient of the trading line is not fixed, it's derived. What's the condition? We discussed it last week, which is it must sit between these two values. What value is it is down to trade negotiations. But the 1:1 is not fixed. Right? The 1:1 is not fixed. The 1:1 is in a way semi-arbitrary. Okay? That's why I just reiterate now. So the trading line, right? The easy way, right, is you just draw the point first for where you're consuming and producing at after trade. Okay? And then I say the idiot-proof way to remember is you go to where you have a CA, you go to the maximum quantity, and then you draw the line up or the line down. Then as far as the gradient goes and the new intercept, you must ask yourself what's the trading ratio. The trading ratio will tell you what the intercept or the gradient is. Okay? So in other words, the gradient of this line and the intercept is not fixed. It depends on what your trading ratio is. It will reflect your trading ratio. So if it's 2, then it will be 40, right, for example. Okay?
How do we know what's the trading ratio?
So as far as you are concerned when you're doing an essay, right, you are pre-memorizing it. So it depends on what, if you're memorizing my version, the trading ratio is 1. But in your answer, you need to explain why the trading ratio is 1. And there's just 2 things you have to say. 1.1, okay? Point 1 is that it's 1 because it has to sit between these 2 values. Right? The wheat cost US 0.6 cloth to produce, and China would have incurred 2 cloth to produce it themselves. So for it to be mutually beneficial, the price must sit in between. Right? There are 2 costs. That's number 1. Right? Secondly is why it's 1 is just down to negotiation, so it doesn't have to be 1. Right? But we made an assumption that it's 1 in this case. So that's why I say it's partially derived, it's partially arbitrary. Right? It's arbitrary in the sense that it can be anything between 0.6 to 2. But it's not arbitrary in the sense that it cannot exceed this range. There is limitations on it. Okay? Any more questions about this? No? Okay, so if we contrast, right, tables versus this, first of all you have to remember, if you go to exam and you want to do PPC, you don't have the benefit of all of this. Unless you draw it yourself lah. But if you're going to draw it yourself, then why even bother using the PPC version? So that's why I say this is a lot more taxing. The graphs are wonderful because as you try to recall, okay, what did I learn? You draw it one by one and you explain it. That's basically your essay. But to do the PPC, you have to already know what the numbers are, what you're going to draw, and there's no hand holding here. The diagrams are not self-explanatory. They cannot tell you like what's going on. But you learn this, you remember the tables instead. It makes for a very systematic and very organized essay. It makes your life a whole lot easier. Okay, so it's down to choice. If you want to be aggressive, you want to score well, you want to write faster, this is definitely a million times better. This is way faster than drawing 4 diagrams, right? 4 graphs. Four tables for that matter. But if you want a safe and steady way, then going this way, there's lesser margin for error. This can go very, very horribly wrong. Okay? Last thing would be, take note, I think some schools actually represent the PPC diagrams on one graph. They draw both countries on one graph, which is fine. I mean, just follow whatever is there. But drawing them separately is easier to see. Okay? If you happen to have 2 PPCs, just take note that the trading line will sit between their 2 PPCs. That's all. That's the key feature. Okay? If you have difficulty with your school's version, just take a photo and send to me. I'll explain to you how it works. Okay? Questions? Okay, let's talk about sources of comparative advantage. There are 3. Okay? First one is international differences in factor endowments. Greater supply of certain factors, the cheaper those factors are. Right? To be precise, what we mean by the cheaper those factors are is that to produce more of the good using the FOP have lower up cost. Right, remember everything has to go at up cost. So it's like, okay, use Singapore as an example. Singapore versus China. China has a lot of land. If China decides to build a hospital, they can still build a school, an airport, a highway, blah blah blah. Singapore has to make a decision between, oh, if I build an extra factory, it means I have 10 less office blocks. So my up cost is a lot higher because that resource is more scarce. If the resource is more abundant, your up cost is lower because what you have to sacrifice is lower. You know what I mean? So the more you have, the lower your up cost is. Because the less you have to sacrifice, the more you can have of whatever you want to make. Simple? Because always remember, right? Up costs arise from scarcity. Scarcity means not enough. So the extent that you have not enough will determine your cost. Logical? So like in Singapore, so always remember the way to think, as I said in my example, is like, oh, if in Singapore we want to build a factory, oh, why don't we have farms? Let's build a farm. I build one farm means maybe one less CBD. You go to CBD, right, 20 buildings, then maybe you only have one small farm, right? Because agriculture needs a lot of space. But you could be giving up like maybe jobs for 50,000 people just in the office space. You know, one office building, 40, 50, 60 stories, right? How many people are there versus farming? Right, so your cost is really high. But China, no problem. You got a farm, you can still have the office next to it. Same for labor, right? Singapore. Can we do farming? Can. Can you get people to harvest corn? Can. But every person that's harvesting corn is one less doctor that we can potentially have, or one less lawyer we can potentially have, or one less, what white collar job we're talking about. For China, no issues. We can have a lot of farmers, we can still have a lot of technologists. Okay? So that's how the abundance of resources thing figure into these things. Okay? So always remember, you need to think just all costs. I phrase it like that so that it's easy for you to remember. It's cheaper. Cheaper in what sense? Cheaper in what cost sense. Okay? Differences in technology. Alright, so differences in R&D and rate of technological adoption. So technology can also be a source of comparative advantage. Right? So of course the key aspect will be technology gives you efficiency. Right? The more efficient you are in producing something, the lower your cost will be. Right? Because if I can use the same amount of resources to produce even more, then I don't have to give up resources, right, from producing other things to produce more of this thing. Right? So let's say you talk about something, you talk about farming again. Right? Nowadays, people talk about vertical farming. That means instead of farming on a flat piece of land, you build like a 10, 20-story high structure and then you farm like that. So it makes sense, right? Because every square feet of space that I use, I can farm 20 times the output as compared to before. So that substantially lowers my cost of farming, right? As opposed to before, I need 20 times the size of the land. So that's how technology comes in. And there are two drivers for technology. Technology, of course, has to come from R&D, right? This is why every developed country that's good in technology, good in R&D, have top universities. That's what universities are for, right? Primarily for research purposes because they drive innovation in the country. So if we talk about a country like Germany, Germany has very good technical schools. That's why they have some of the best car makers in the world, right? That's basically how technological advancement happens. Or you could adopt technology. So especially for developing countries, they don't innovate everything themselves. They adopt technology. They use technology. So whether is it differences in R&D rates or rate of technological adoption, that could explain differences in comparative advantage as well, because of different levels of technology in different countries. Okay, and the last one is actually the most important one. Dynamic comparative advantage. Some schools will put this phrase called kaleidoscopic comparative advantage. Right? It means the same thing, right? It just means that it's dynamic. And actually number 3 is the most important because number 3 teaches you something very crucial, which is that comparative advantage can be developed and can be lost. Okay? Meaning comparative advantage is not static. Why is this a big deal? Number 1, it's a big deal because if you do a trade essay, then now supply side policy matters. Because supply side policy is exactly how you will develop comparative advantages. Alright? Singapore, one of Singapore's top exports, right, is pharmaceuticals. I don't think you know, you might not even know this, or maybe your Econs will tell you that. Right? But we manufacture a lot of pills, which obviously the technology wasn't existent here 50 years ago, but the government spent a lot of money, bringing the foreign firms in, building Biopolis, getting all the pharma firms there, making sure NUS has like a pharma course, make sure that there are people that will go in and take jobs there. Then you develop a comparative advantage in pharmaceuticals. Right? Same thing for what we're trying to do in technology now, right? They are trying to fund a lot of startups, to get a lot of startups to operate here, get a lot of big firms to come here. Same logic. So the whole point is that comparative advantage can be developed and can be lost. So when did Singapore lose comparative advantage? We used to be great at manufacturing. There was a time in our history we actually made cars here. Right? Toyota had a factory here, I think Volvo had a factory here. We made cars here. Because back in the day, right, our labor force was more educated. Right? They're able to operate machinery relative to the region. Right? So even though the region was cheaper, right, there's not enough skilled labor to operate machinery to make cars and so on. But over time, as they get more educated and they have more people, right, they have a lower comparative advantage than us when it comes to car making. So we lose out, so we have no more car makers. Right? All the car making goes to like Thailand nowadays. Most of our Toyotas come from there. Okay, so the key is that comparative advantage can be gained and lost. Right? Your op cost to make something can go up or down depending on how your country is like. And remember, the op cost here, right, in comparative advantage is relative to your trading partners. So even if you are static, or even if your op cost is falling, but if your rival country's op cost fall faster than you will lose your comparative advantage. Okay, very, very crucial. Okay, very, very crucial. So as we go into the topic of trade, right, one thing you realize is also that the number of key concepts that you need to know and technical terms actually shrinks even more. Macro is really a bit fluffy, right? Macro got a lot of examples, a lot of explanation, a lot of elaboration. Trade also like that. Like these 3 points, right? Literally general knowledge, and you make it up, right? You can explain what the comparative advantage is. All you have to talk about is op cost, right? But the elaboration, the illustration can be through anything at all. Okay. The limitations of the theory are also the assumptions of the theory, right? Assumptions mean that we assume certain things to be true, but they are also limitations because they might not be true in real life, of which we have 5. Okay, the first one is increasing op cost. So our assumption was constant op cost. So the limitation is that, well, in reality, op costs are unlikely to be constant, right? They are likely to be rising. And that has very profound implications on TOCA. Because the whole TOCA framework is based on, if you have a CA in this thing, you specialize and you trade for the other thing. But if op cost is rising, what that means first and foremost is that full specialization is impossible. By the time you fully specialize, it's likely your op cost is higher than your trading partner. So you will only specialize up to a certain level. That's all. So it will change how much you produce and how much you actually trade. Right? And correspondingly, it will affect how much you can benefit from trading like that. Right? Make sense? Because you can't produce that much, you can't specialize that much, you can't trade that much. Then your output wouldn't rise that much. Okay? So it limits the benefits of TOCA. Okay? You might not be able to fully realize the benefits as proposed by TOCA. Number 2, transport cost. This is a mega big deal, right? We literally didn't talk about transport costs at all. We assume, oh, you know, well, let's trade 1-to-1, right? So in this case, right, US they sell 10 wheat to China, China pay 10 cloth, right? What if the transport cost for China is another 10 cloth? Because we don't talk about money, so we have to think about them paying things. Then will they still want to trade? Maybe that's still okay, because that's the maximum. That's 1 is to 2. What if their transport cost is 20 cloth, 30 cloth? Right? So it's very simple. I mean, putting numbers aside, right? The whole point is this. We assume that you trade your trading line and all that based on free and frictionless trade. That's impossible. Right? Trade has friction in terms of both time as well as monetary cost when it comes to transport, right? So just because, so a simple example of it, let's say Russia has a big CA over us in some area and we have a big CA over them in another area, we still wouldn't trade with them. There's a reason why our major trading bloc is ASEAN, because they are our neighbors, trading costs are low. Right? You won't trade with Russia because even though they can be damn cheap, right? By the time you ship it here, it'll be more expensive. You need a simple example. Before recent times, before like Amazon and Taobao and all that get so penetrated in Singapore and shipping costs come down, right? Last time China was really cheap, right? You know that. But the thing is, the cost of shipping that thing here, if it makes it more expensive, you won't buy from China, right? So that's how transport costs are important. It can eliminate, right, the benefits from trade, right? It can eliminate the cost savings of trade. So that's what I'm saying here. It might outweigh the benefits of trading. So it might make it such that, okay, I have a CA over you, you have a CA over me. We should trade these things, but we might not trade at all, right? So again, it limits the benefits, right, of free trade. We might not be able to realize what TOCA says fully because of the presence of transport cost. Okay? Okay? Imperfect factor mobility, partially explains why it's increasing our cost. So like even in my earlier PPC example, I said, oh, you know, if you want to produce more B, you have to give up more and more A. Because as you divert resources from producing one thing into the other, the resources are going to be increasingly less suitable. That's just the reality. Even if you think about something as simple as metal, right? The metal that you use to produce an airplane and the metal you use to produce a car is very different, right? So you could divert one into the other, but you know, over time, your output is going to start falling. Your marginal output will start falling because the resources are not as suited for it. Or you can think of labor, right? Yes, banking is a high-skill job, right? Being an accountant is a high-skill job. Sure, some people can be a banker and an accountant, but the more bankers you switch over to accountants, right, the less likely the next person is going to be a very good accountant if he was a good banker in the first place. Right, so it's about the suitability. It's just like you just think about in school, right? You're good at some subjects, not so good in others. So maybe you can do, right? But the more and more people I push into that one subject, the less likely everyone is going to be good at that thing. So the marginal output is going to start falling, and that explains why you can increase your output. Okay. Okay. Number 4, barriers to trade. This is very simple. The whole point is this whole thing is predicated on free trade, free and frictionless trade. So the frictionless part comes in the form of transport cost. The free part comes in the sense that there's no trade barriers, which we will go on to do later. Right? So trade barriers obviously is a very big part of the news cycle nowadays because of the stupid tariff war that's going on between China and the US. We will do tariffs in detail later, but simply put, what tariffs are indirect taxes on imports. That's it. Simple as that. Right? So when you put tariffs on imports, the thing is your trading ratio will no longer be 1:1 already. Your domestic consumers will have to pay more on top of whatever the trading ratio is. So much like transport costs, barriers to trade could eliminate the benefits of trade. Okay? So countries might not be able to fully realize the benefits from TOCA because of barriers to trade. Lastly, market power. Market power is very simple. The whole point is we assume, of course, in normal, anytime we talk about things like that in macro or in trade, right? Of course, we assume perfectly, fully functioning markets, right? So one of the key market failures, of course, is market power. And where market power comes in is that even though your cost will be like that, your marginal cost is a certain thing, we know that firms with market power will price above marginal cost. They have a lot of bargaining power. So they might not necessarily trade with you 1:1 if they have substantial bargaining power. Right? So that again could curtail against trade. So market power basically results in pricing distortions. Right? So the trading will not be fair, it won't be in accordance to TOCA. Okay? So this page, right? How do countries trade? Or why do they trade? What's the benefits of TOCA? You will always need to use this. Okay? Let's just say that the tables and the PPCs are essential as long as the question explicitly says TOCA. If they don't, there might be some leeway. And by leeway, I mean you can try to explain TOCA and the benefits without the use of diagrams. Right? So generally the rule for Econs is like that. How detailed you go into something in a part A depends on whether they name drop it in the question. If they do, then it's very important. If not, if you're just using it because you know you need it to answer the question, you have some leeway as to how deep to go. Okay? Okay. Page 4. Page 4 is really important as well. It looks very short, but it's just because it's very compact. Okay? Page 4 is basically a 15-mark essay on its own. Okay? So page 4 is basically pros and cons of trade. Okay? Pros and cons of trade. So just now, when we did TOCA, we did a very superficial one, which is, oh, TOCA is great, radio consumption and production. But we want to cascade down into the detail. Okay, so what does that mean for economies? Remember, right, this is, I said it's largely an extension of macro, so we need to link it to macro concept as well. Okay, in my notes, I split it into micro and macro, then pros and cons. You don't have to do this, but I'm quite sure everyone will have micro and macro arguments in their notes. So whenever I do this is because I'm telling you, if you're writing this essay, then a well-balanced essays will have points from all 4 panels. Right? Rather have only purely macro or purely micro arguments. Okay, so we start with advantages, micro advantages. The first one is simply a rise in consumer utility. Right? A rise in consumer utility because they get to consume more. Right? You can consume beyond the PPC, obviously means your utility is higher than before. Your welfare is higher than before. Okay? Rather straightforward. Number 2, it's about firms, right? So firms will benefit from higher profits because of a fall in cost of production, and by extension, lower prices will benefit consumers as well. How does it benefit consumers? Increase consumer surplus, right, and increase utility. Okay? Consumers always benefit when there are lower prices, because it also means they get to consume more. And that will always have the consumer surplus. So for firms will be profits. So the question is, why will there be a fall in cost of production? There are 2 possible reasons. The first one is IEOS, right? So simply put, when you have free trade, right? Obviously, there will be a rise in demand for your goods and services. A rise in demand will support a larger scale of production, right? And then you can read IUS.
What's
So,
that?
which one?
The C then the
CS? CS. Rise in CS, comma, rise in utility.
What's that?
Consumer surplus.
Oh.
Okay, so you can view IOS, for example, right, technical EOS, right? So simple things like the container theory, right? You don't produce at a big scale, at a big output level, you cannot maximize the use of certain containers or shipping or so on. So my favorite example will be Amazon, right? I told you all before, Amazon has their own fleet of jumbo jets. That is confirmed cheaper than using UPS or FedEx or DHL. But Amazon can't do that if they don't have that big a volume of things to ship. Right? Because a jumbo jet is not cheap. One jumbo jet is 100 million. Right? But their shipping cost will be in the multi-billions. Right? If they use DHL. So it makes sense for them to get their own jet, they can maximize the capacity of the jet. If you're a small e-commerce company, you're Zalora, right, or Lazada, it doesn't make sense. You don't have that volume. You cannot fill your plane. Right? So that's an example of EOS. Okay? This link has important repercussions for you. What this means is that, right, they can actually give you firms questions, right, and use trade as the preamble. Okay? It has come up before, I don't think for A's, but school exams they like to do that. They like to ask you things like, discuss the extent that globalization will benefit firms. Then you have to, so the good news is it's still a firms question. You just need to be able to use the trade and globalization background for your point selection. Okay? But here's an illustration. Okay, B is a new point. You haven't learned this before, but it's something really easy. Right, it's just called learning by doing. Learning by doing is a function of familiarity. Right, so the argument is that your productivity will rise, and when productivity rise, you basically lower average cost. Right, from a firm perspective. Because you get more efficient. To be precise, you will lower both average and marginal cost. Okay, basically it changes your variable cost of production. Because you're more efficient than before. Right? More productive. Productivity and efficiency is pretty much the same. It's just that generally we use productivity to describe macro and efficiency to describe micro. Generally speaking. But you can use them pretty much interchangeably. Because you can refer to worker productivity, right, or worker efficiency. It basically means the same thing. Okay? So learning by doing, a lower cost, you also lower profits. Okay? So that's number 2, and the last one is number 3, simple. Prices, we kind of already talked about it, but generally, as a separate point, so this one was just more about increased consumption and production, right, beyond PPC. This one was lower prices, yes, but a result of lower cost of production by local firms, right? This lower prices is just more direct. It's more about like cheaper imports. You can buy cheaper imports, right? It's not about whether local firms can produce more cheaply, but it's about the ability to buy cheaper imports. Right? I can go on AliExpress and I can order stuff for cheap. Like a lot of household stuff are like super cheap on AliExpress. Right? You know what AliExpress is? It's like the international version of the Alibaba app. Right? People ship furniture for Alibaba, I'm not even kidding. People ship sofa and dining tables and all
There's
that.
this entire house is from Taobao. Like every single thing in that house is from Taobao.
Is it? Yeah, but it's really cheap. It's really cheap. The only thing is, I think if you want to ship furniture, you have to pay for the annual shipping thingy that's like $100 or you know what.
She did Taobao, it was like $800 something.
Holy shit. Yeah. But it's good. Like you can buy stuff from Taobao. It takes a while, it takes like 2 weeks or 3 weeks to ship here, but it's good, it's cheap. Okay, so this one is about being able to buy imports cheaply directly. And then of course, simply by virtue of the fact that you have free trade, you open up trade, you can buy domestic, you can buy foreign, there's greater consumer choice. And consumer choice also adds to utility. So if I were just to take a step back, right, when you talk about consumer utility, of course this is a big deal, okay? And then choice matters, as well as quality. So you can think of it having 3 dimensions in total. So consumers will benefit from greater choice, right? If you want to go into a bit more detail and you struggle to explain how does choice add to utility, you can say with more choices, right, the goods and services can appeal to a wider range of tastes and preferences. Right, can appeal to a wider range of tastes and preferences. And that's how choice adds to consumer utility. Quality is quite obvious, right? Quality, definitely higher utility. Okay? Okay, so 3 points for advantages. Basically, right, micro always means consumers, producers, and to a lesser extent, government and society. Okay, but we don't have points for government and society here. Although, from an efficiency standpoint, free trade will add to allocative efficiency from a global standpoint. Right, we'll produce the right amount of goods and services and even productive efficiency at lower cost. So it better maximizes resource allocation, if you think about it. Right, that's why you can produce more than before. Okay? But don't need like just consumers and producers. If you have it in your notes, like sure, like efficiency is a valid point. But just these 3 points will suffice. Disadvantages, 2 things. The first one is unfair competition and dumping. They're kind of separate points. Okay? Let me do dumping first. Dumping is a bit more narrow, it's easier. Dumping is what I like to call international predatory pricing. This is an informal phrase, please do not use it. Okay, it just makes it easier for you to remember. Because predatory pricing, when we learned in firms, it basically means sell at P less than MC. You are basically forcing your rivals to make losses. Okay? So, dumping is when a country does that, but they do it internationally. Right? So, China, of course, over the years got accused of dumping all sorts of things everywhere around the world, right? I think shoes and ovens and like even bras and stuff like it's hilarious. They
Yeah, but CSQ said bras.
Yeah, I remember that CSQ they started bras. There's an EU case, right?
Yeah, they.
And there was a solar panel one. There was a case study on the China solar panel dumping also. So basically, dumping is when you sell below marginal cost in a foreign market, right? And why that's a problem is because this will drive out domestic firms. But at the very least, it will result in lower profits. The worst case is that you will drive out domestic firms. Right? So dumping is actually a subset of unfair competition. Right? But unfair competition is not just about dumping, there's another way, which I'll tell you in a while. Okay, so dumping is when you sell below marginal cost. And it's a problem because you put local firms out of business through unfair competition. You unfairly undercut them, undermine them, it's not sustainable. And then if you want to go one step further, basically you could result in like foreign monopolies. Right? These foreign firms come in, right? They undercut you, they drive you out, and then they raise prices after that. So we need to borrow a bit of our market structure knowledge, right, to be able to elaborate on that. For the concept of unfair competition, okay, another aspect of unfair competition is subsidy. Right? Again, China is the beauty of this. Okay, state subsidies, right? Basically, the government subsidizes firms, right? So they give the artificial cost advantage. From a TOCA perspective, you can also see it as, oh, it's an artificial TOCA. Actually, they got no CA one, but the government subsidizes them and makes it really cheap for them to undercut their rivals. From a micro standpoint, the outcome is exactly the same as dumping, right? Because if I subsidize you, you can produce very cheaply, you can undercut foreign firms. So actually very often, right, the subsidy and the dumping goes hand in hand. The subsidy allows you to artificially reduce your cost such that you are actually pricing below marginal cost. It's just that your marginal cost got artificially brought down. So they are separate points, right? Subsidizing and giving unfair advantage and dumping is two separate points. They can exist without the other, but they can also exist together. Okay? So subsidy is just, I give you an unfair cost advantage, so you can undercut rivals, right? And then you can sell cheaper than them, you can drive them out, you can make profits. Dumping is when you sell below marginal cost to drive out rivals, and so on. Can they go together? Can. The government can subsidize the firm such that they price artificially below marginal cost. That means they can price below their true MC because of the subsidy. Because the subsidy will lower their marginal cost. Right? Subsidy will lower the marginal cost. So they are separate points, but they can go together. Okay, so the long story short is, it's unfair for local firms because you face unfair foreign competition. They can drive you out, your profits will fall, right? And then you could be replaced by a foreign monopoly, which is bad for everyone. Okay, import of harmful goods. This is very simple. This is just demerit goods. Okay, so simple examples will be cigarettes, alcohol, right? We import those things. Singapore makes like neither of those things, right? You want to stretch the example a bit more, you can even think of drugs. But when you have free trade, it allows smuggling. So smuggling is a big issue, right? So not only do they smuggle like duty unpaid stuff, they could smuggle like drugs and weapons and what have you not lah.
So like smuggling is separate from that, right?
Smuggling is separate from that. We're talking about selling harmful goods through legitimate channels, right? But of course, what a country deems harmful might be subjective lah. But of course nowadays, like, I mean, there was an era, the prohibition era in the US, if you know what that is, alcohol was illegal, right? Alcohol was illegal in the prohibition era. But of course nowadays, alcohol is like legal basically in most places, right? So what are harmful goods could be quite subjective lah, right? So countries can might be exposed. If you really free trade, oh, let's say this country got a comparative advantage growing pot, then what? Are you supposed to import weed? Right? It doesn't make sense lah. So you just follow CA and just import whatever, you could be exposed to harmful goods. That's what they're saying. Okay? Okay, so that's all the micro points. So you can think of it as benefits for consumers and producers. Here is kind of like firms and market failure. If you need a tag to help yourself remember what the points are. Right? So that's a firm point, that's a market failure point. Okay? Macro. So, first thing I'll tell you is, whenever you touch on anything macro in trade, think ADAS, think goals. So literally as you go down this list, right, what you want to ask yourself is, how does it benefit growth, employment, inflation, BOP? Okay? First one, easy, right? First one is a growth and employment point. Very obvious that you got free trade, right? You'll drive X minus M. You drive X minus M, AD is going to rise. AD rise, output rise, growth, employment. You know the stuff. Okay? So, actual growth and cyclical employment. You can even talk about, like, this here honestly is not very comprehensive. There are a lot of other things you can talk about as well. Right? For example, I'll give you a simple example if we take an ADS perspective. Okay? We don't overwhelm you, so like we keep it simple. We tell you the outcomes. But if you take a step back and try to reason out the benefits yourself, right, there's three major areas you can talk about. From AD perspective, right, AD rising obviously is X minus M. SRAS rising, you have the MFOP angle. Right? You open up free trade, you can import FOPs more cheaply than before. Right? You can import FOP more cheaply than before. The truth is, right, US, China has their own oil. They can produce oil domestically. Even US, before shale, right, they could produce oil already, just not as cheaply. So they import from abroad. You see? China has a lot of natural resources, but they buy a ton of stuff from Australia and Indonesia. So cheap imports, great, drives economic growth. Okay? So X minus M, MFOP, LRAS, simple, you import capital goods. right? So it adds to the capital stock in your country. In other words, you invest, right? It's the I component of AD, but you're really buying I from overseas. Like for example, Singapore, right? We don't make a single tractor, we don't make a single truck, a single crane. All of these things are imported. So if you can't import, right, you're screwed, right? Then how you build your buildings? Right? So being able to import capital is really important, right? That allows you to drive LRAS through. So technically from this thing, right, you can see, you can take everything and link your macro goals yourself. You don't even need to mark if you understand the base factors. But for simplicity, when we start, we just give you the more straightforward points, right? But when we do questions, you can see how the points can actually evolve. So first one, growth and employment. In fact, we can even go one step further and talk about employment. We can talk in terms of structural unemployment, right? You could actually reduce structural unemployment if you train workers and you put them into the industries that you have a CA in, or you develop a new source of comparative advantage, which is what the government is trying to do now. Right, that's why they do the skills future and all that. They're trying to switch people from one industry to another. You build a new industry, you build a new CA, you trade according to that, you can reduce structural unemployment. So there's a lot of ways. So that's why when I started this chapter, I said this is macro plus. Whatever you learn is still relevant. We're just putting a trade overlay on top of it. Okay? Okay? Development, just a side point. Development just means things like you could reduce income inequality, kind of like as a side effect from growth, so that you can think of it as the non-material aspects of getting economic growth. Reduce income inequality, provide more merit goods, redistribution, blah blah blah. So the whole point is, particularly for developing countries, when they trade, right, the extra GDP growth will help them in economic development as well. Right? Otherwise they got no money. Right? They got no money to grow, they got no money to build infrastructure, they got no money to redistribute, they got no money to build schools and so on and so forth. What's that? Which one? Income inequality, very good. Lower income inequality, increase very good. Okay? Number two, dynamic gains from trade. Dynamic means ongoing, right? Not static. It means changing. So dynamic gains from trade means the gains from trade that comes from an ongoing basis. In a way, you can think of things like growth and all that as being a bit static. It's like, oh, when you open up free trade, the demand will rise, and then that's kind of it. Right? Dynamic gains from trade is, as we trade, even if we just keep trading the same amount, there are gains that come out from it. So the first one is increased competition in the domestic market. So we're going to borrow a bit of points from micro again, which is that although the foreign firm might not be in your country physically, right, because they might just be exporting to you, but your local firms are facing competition from cheaper imports. So they're forced to be more competitive, they're forced to innovate, they're forced to cut costs. Right? And what that could do is, on a very simple level, if it drives innovation, then of course there's some LRAS benefit here. That's what I think. Okay, there's some LRAS benefit here. If they drive cost cutting, there will be SRAS benefit. And innovation can also have AD benefit through X minus M as well. Right? So that's what I mean by we borrow a bit of firms concepts, which is that what happens when firms face competition? They are forced to product differentiate, right? They are forced to innovate, they are forced to cut costs. And the thing is, you might be like, but that happens at a micro level. But here's the thing, if you trade an economy-wide, you are facing more competition, you expect that on aggregate, there will be more cost cutting, more productivity gains, more innovation. Yes? Okay, so we use a bit of our firm's knowledge.
What's the word for?
Drives innovation and cost cutting. So innovation can benefit AD through X minus M. Right, you make better exports, your exports are more competitive. You gain LRAS of course from R&D, and then you could gain the SRAS from cost cutting as well. Okay? Tech transfer, China's favorite topic, right? Basically, a good example would be like the smartphones, right? China obviously didn't invent it. Started at Apple, Samsung kind of invented it. Then the Chinese firms is going wild with it. Like if you actually look at Xiaomi, right? You all know what Xiaomi is? Xiaomi is freaking hilarious, like especially a few years back. if you can watch all the Xiaomi product launches, right, it's basically an Apple product launch and they just change the name. The stage looks the same, the font looks the same, the slides look the same, even the CEO dressed like Steve Jobs. And the phone also looks like an iPhone. Like they just completely rip off the whole company's image, right? And they just turn it into Xiaomi. So that's a poor example of a tech transfer per se, but tech transfer also involves kind of a bit of copying, a bit of learning. So the truth is Xiaomi is not 100% identical to the iPhone, but they borrow the ideas from there and then they innovate on top of it, right? Even you think about an iPhone or an iPod for that matter, is that really 100% normal? Not really. Before the iPhone there was touchscreen phones, it's called Palm Pilot, it sucks, right? But it existed, it just wasn't that great. So they innovated on what used to be a Palm Pilot, right? And then they came out with something better. Because, you know, we're very used to the whole like, your app screen looks like this, right? Like this one square. That was existent already in the Palm Pilot era. Even BlackBerry used that arrangement because that was logical, right? But Apple just did it a lot better. So when you talk about technology innovation, nothing is really new per se. Everything is always they benefit very little from the global trading network. So it's like US and China now, right? They're not happy with each other. You know, South China Sea, China can put things on the island. US sail their carrier across. You know, a lot of posturing, but they won't fight because it benefits no one to fight. Even US and Russia did something very interesting in Syria. So US backs the rebels, Russia backed the government. So they give them weapons, they give them troops, they train them, but US never fight on the front line in Russia. Because when you're of a certain size and your economic ties, it doesn't make sense to go to war. So beneficial political links helps economic stability. It gives everyone a vested interest everywhere. So Singapore is also very smart. Right? We are one of the countries, right, top destinations globally for American MNCs. We got a ton of them here. The US has a naval base here in Singapore, right? They have a Pacific fleet. I think that's in the Philippines as well. Why? Because geographically Singapore is quite screwed up because we're surrounded by all the hostile countries. So we made it such that US has a vested interest in us. If anyone try to attack us, the Pacific fleet will come and the naval base, the US naval base in Singapore will help us fight all these things. So we are aligning our political interests so that we can align our economic interests as well. Make sense? So that's where the political link makes a lot of sense. If everyone is integrated, everyone has to gain from maintaining the international trading order, then no one will want to go to war. And that helps economic stability. That helps to align everyone's interest. So you see like the conflicts that the Middle East have with the US and the rest of the world is simply because they are out of the loop. Right? They got left out, they got left behind. Economically they are challenged, politically they are challenged, socially they have a lot of issues. Right? So they fight because they have nothing to lose. Okay? Disadvantages. There are 4. The first one is over-specialization. This is key. This is also why I illustrated an example earlier of partial specialization in TOCA. What's over-specialization? I told you the story of SoftBank last week. Right? I told you SoftBank is a very big investment fund. They have a $100 billion investment fund. They invested in things like Uber and Grab and so on, WeWork, and I told you more than half came from the Saudis. And we all know what the Saudis depend on. They depend on oil. That's the biggest source of their nation's income. Brunei is the same. Brunei is probably worse off than Saudi because they are literally only oil driven. Right? So why? Why Saudis give 50 billion to SoftBank to invest in all this frontier technology? They even invest in like electric vehicles, you know, solar, all these things that supposedly will eat oil's lunch. But they do that because they understand the day oil stop becoming relevant, which honestly we're still at least like, I think 1-2 decades away, right? They know that their economy will die. So the point of over-specialization is very easy. If trade is a big part of your AD, but you're narrowly dependent on a few industries only, you are dead when that industry goes out of fashion, or even just cyclically. Let's say your country is very dependent on car making. In recessions, you're screwed. Half your population will be unemployed, right? Because in recessions, no one buys cars. So over-specialization, first and foremost, creates volatility on X minus M. Okay? So in the short run, you have major risks in terms of volatility in growth, employment, and BOP. In the long run, you have risk of permanently lower or negative growth rates and structural unemployment and persistent BOP deficit if you are narrowly dependent on a few industries. Right? Which is why, again, this is indirectly another criticism of why TOCA doesn't make sense. Right? Why countries should not fully specialize according to TOCA. Because over-specialization will kill their economy. So this is telling you that even if you have 100 industries and you only have a CA in 5, you probably should maintain the 100 industries, but you partially specialize towards the 5 that you're good at. Okay? Number 2, increased risk of structural unemployment. This is just a general point. Yes, it has some links with over-specialization, but even without over-specialization, even though your economy is very diversified, like US has a very diversified economy. Who has the biggest, who was suffering from structural unemployment in the last 2-3 decades? All the automakers. All the people who were in the car industry really suffered. Because when Japan came in post-World War II, they basically wiped US out. US are not cost competitive in cars at all. So a lot of production moved to Mexico, and even then, so that one already caused a wave of job losses. But even then, a lot of the car makers downsized. Right? So some statistics will be, I think before the last 2 or 3 years, Toyota was the world's largest car maker for like a super long time. They sell like the most number of cars around the world. US is not even close, they're not even close to the top 5. Recently they got overtaken by Volkswagen, I think. Toyota got overtaken by Volkswagen. Okay, but you get the idea. So the idea is, as long as you have trade industries, when you open up free trade, right, and you depend on other people, right, you have a risk of structural unemployment because, what does this come back to? Loss of CA. This is what we talked about on the previous page, right? Comparative advantage can be gained and lost. That means that you're always at risk of structural unemployment. Right? Even one industry, even though you're not very dependent on the industry, but that one industry going down could be tens or hundreds of thousands of people being structurally unemployed. So it is a big deal. Okay, it's not trivial. Number 3, worsening of BOP. Now here's an interesting point, right? Because 3 over here is a direct contradiction of 3 over there. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that impact on BOP depends. Depends on what? Depends on whether you have a CA or not. And how big is your CA? And how many industries do you really have a CA in? Right? And can you maintain your CA? Correct? Because you need to remember, while trade is not a zero-sum game, trade is a positive sum game, as you can see in the previous page. Positive sum game in the sense that everyone can gain. Right? But the aspect that's a zero-sum game is the trade balance. If I got a surplus, you must be in a deficit and vice versa. Okay? So how the BOP works out really depends on where your comparative advantage lies. How big is it? Can you get overtaken? Okay? Lastly, number 4, increased income inequality. Now, the best way to look at this is increase what is called dispersion of outcomes. What do I mean by that? You see, as an economy, as a standalone, we already know that there will be income inequality. Some industries will do better than others, right? Because of changing societal norms and all that. Trade will magnify and accelerate that process. What do I mean by that? You see, for example, in today's age, if you run a technology company, okay? If you run a technology company, you will already grow faster than if you were a farmer, right? But if with free trade and you're a technology company, with the correct trade deals with the correct countries, you could see your revenue like triple, quadruple, quintuple in like 1-2 years' time. Because the market is huge, the demand for these things are huge. But correspondingly, if you allow cheap imports of farm goods to come in, the agriculture sector gets wiped out overnight. So what I mean is that the disparity between the strong, there's a widening disparity between the strong and weak industries. Right? You can also think of this in the CA sense. Right? You specialize in what you have a CA in and don't specialize in what you don't. It's basically asking you to shut down those industries that you have a CA in. Right? Or let it die. Because you're importing goods from the other country, that has a CA in that thing. Right? So if you have a CA, the industry will do very well. If you don't, the industry will do really poorly. And then you might be like, that makes economic sense, what? But the question is, what about the impact on the incomes of those people that are left behind? Right? So it's really important that the government comes in to help these people transition. Or else you have a US problem, right? The US Rust Belt, right? The Midwest, the basic Donald Trump's voter base. Why? Why did they vote him in? Because they got left behind, right? The last 30, 40 years, right? They were the ones that suffered the most from globalization, right? They got left behind. US is not big on big government, right? US has always been very small government, very hands-off, very like free market and all that. But the biggest problem there is that because you are like that, there's very little government support in terms of supply side policies. They don't make a concerted effort to have education and training and all that. It's non-existent in the US. Skills Future, like, they won't even have that. They don't even make education equally accessible to all their kids locally, right? What more this like adult training thing? They don't care, right? Okay, so this is basically a 15-mark essay. And every point is not very long, so you can literally dump everything into the 15-mark essay. Questions? A multiplier is like price discrimination. It's one of those things that is very standalone. You hardly need to talk much about it, but if they do, you really need to know your stuff. The most likely case that terms of trade comes out is always CSQ. They'll give you a table, they make you read it, they make you interpret it. Okay? So it's kind of like a GDP-ish kind of thing if it comes out for CSQ. That's what it's going to be. Okay? Terms of trade, we have actually encountered it already when we talk about T to CA. So when we talk about the trading ratio just now, that's actually the terms of trade, which is I give you 1 week, how many cloth do I get back? Now the problem is in real life, for real economies, right, it's also straightforward. Economies don't just make one thing. So instead of looking at, hey, how much wheat I give you, how much cloth I get back, I need to look at a basket of exports versus a basket of imports. Much like CPR, where we look at a basket of stuff. So the terms of trade is actually, well, the basket of one basket of exports, I can exchange for how many basket of imports. The equation, to put it simply, is like that. Export price index, so like CPI lah. Export price index over import price index times 100 to give you the basic. Okay? So what this tells you is the export price index is the price of one basket of X. So there's a price of one basket of M. Okay? So hypothetically, let's say this number will be around 100, 100 plus minus 100. So it'll be like 90 something, 110, 120, 150, right? Like CPI like that basically. Okay? So let's say this number is 150. What this means is that I sell one basket of X, I can buy 1.5 basket of M. Make sense? If it's 100 means I sell one basket of X, I buy one basket of M. 1.5 times 150 will mean relative to the base year where it was 100, now I can buy 1.5 times as much M as before. Okay? So if I 150 again, 150 means relative to the base year it was 100, right? I can buy 1.5 times more imports than I used to be able to. Then of course if it's 50, then I can buy half as much as before. Okay? So generally you expect developed countries to have better terms of trade compared to developing. Why? The export value of developed countries' goods tend to be higher. There's a very simple example of it. I sell one car, I can buy 1,000 back the price. But that's not the terms of trade. Sell one car, you can buy 1,000 back the price. But you need to sell 1,000 back the price to buy one car. Right? That will be what terms of trade is trying to tell you. Okay? So this bit is most important for CFQ. They'll give you a trend lah, right? They give you a table, they ask you, describe the trend in TOT for country X over the years, right? Then after that, then they ask you the impacts, which is what we're going to come down into. Okay? This will be the impact. We look at factors first, okay? What affects TOT? It's actually really easy. Because TOT is about price. Price means it's about demand and supply. Okay? So demand, supply of X or M. So anything goes. I give you a couple here, but really anything goes. Anything you've learned in demand and supply is fair game. Right? Simply put, something like if demand for exports rise, export price index go up. Right? Demand for exports fall, export price index go down. You get the idea? Supply and export rise, so on and so forth. Really easy, right? Factors, demand supply. Okay? Now, this is the most important one. Okay? Super, super important. The major application here, right, will be when TOT change, how does it affect current account? Okay? When TOT change, how does it affect current account? I'm going to split the, okay, wait, before that. Terminology. When your TOT is rising, we call it improve. When your TOT is falling, we call it worsen. But I want you to remember something, okay? That's the terminology we use. But it says very little about whether the thing is good or bad. In other words, rising, improve doesn't mean good all the time. Worsen doesn't mean bad. Okay, keep that in mind. That's something that trips a lot of people up, which is because they study it, right? They say improve, worsen, right? Then everyone thinks that it was improve means good, worsen means bad. It's not. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. That's the terminology. Now, then when we talk about impact, I'm going to split it into two halves. Okay, the first half is this italicized part. Okay, that's the first part. The first part is generally we expect that if your TOT improves, your current account worsens, and vice versa. Why? It's a bit like exchange rates. TOT improve is a bit like appreciation, right? If your export price index is rising relative to your import price index, then you expect that people will buy less exports and your local people will buy more imports. Okay? So, improving TOT, XPI rise relative to higher relative to MPI. Okay, export price index slightly higher relative to import price index. Okay. So when it's higher, right, then we expect export sales to fall and import expenditure to rise. Right, because foreigners will switch away from buying exports and then domestic consumers will switch to buying imports. So we expect a current account worsening. And just be very careful here, okay? When we talk about appreciation, we always say, oh, exports become more expensive in foreign currency, right? And then imports become cheaper to domestic. Don't do that, right? Here it's very simple. If the export price index is rising, right, then it means that, or rather if the TOT is improving. If I try TOT improve, you realize that you don't actually know whether it's a top change or the bottom change, alright? But it doesn't matter. Our whole point is that it's relative. That means exports, we can say for a fact that exports are relatively more expensive than imports now. So we expect that foreign consumers will buy less exports and domestic consumers will buy more imports relative to what it was previously, and so it should be to a current account worsening. No need for Marshall-Lerner condition also, please. Okay? So that's the level 1 explanation, okay? The in-depth one, which you'll use more often, is this. The answer to this is it depends on what caused TOT to change. So this is point 1, is the most important out of the 3. You're going to use number 1 the most often, okay? Okay, it depends on what caused TOT to change. Now, here's the good news. The answer to this is actually demand and supply and elasticity. I give you an example, okay? Let's say now your TOT is rising because your export price index is going up. Okay? Let's say now your TOT is rising because export price index is rising. What can cause export price index to rise? Either what can cause the export price index to rise? There's only two ways, right? It's either
Factor of inflation, cost increase.
I mean that's a very narrow subset. That will be the supply point, right? So you're telling me it's either supply fall or demand rise. If demand rise, it's very clear cut. Correct? Rise in total revenue. Right? Demand for exports go up, the export price will go up, correct, but people won't buy less. The price is going up exactly because people are buying more. Right? So demand increase, total revenue for exports will rise. So my CA improves in this case. Now when supply falls, then you have a problem. It depends on PED. Right? If it's like that, then it's good. If it's like that, it's bad. Make sense? Simple? So I think a couple of years back, the A-level question was something like they give you a trend. They give you two tables. They give you a table for TOT and they give you a graph for current account. So the table showed your TOT improving, but your current account improving with it. Then for 4 marks, they ask you to explain how come this can be the case. So you need to use this. So it's just demand and supply. TOT has never come out right in SYSA before, as far as I'm aware. Never, like in the history, right, recent history of A-levels, in the last 15, 20 years, never come out before. Only CSQ. Okay, and the biggest, most challenging thing they can test you is here already. Right? So the key point is, when they give you a question and they ask you, hey, how TOT affects current account? Or hey, can TOT affect current account like that? Oh, what's the impact of TOT? Always remember, it's basically a demand and supply analysis. So the steps I give you is here, okay? When you want to interpret the impact of a TOT change on X minus M on your current account, the first thing to ask yourself is export price index changing or import price index changing? Okay? Second is it because of demand or supply? If it's demand, it's straightforward, right? Demand rise, expenditure rise, revenue rise. Demand drop, expenditure drop, revenue drop. If it's supply, then PEV matters, right? If supply drop, inelastic, good for revenue, right? Elastic, bad for revenue. Okay? So you can repeat this same analysis exactly for the import price index case also. So it's literally just always remembering that, oh, export price index, import price index can change only two things, right? It's demand and supply. So either demand rise, supply rise, demand drop, supply drop. Right? Okay, then the rest are the more, so you can think of points number 2 and 3, right? And this general assumption as being layered on top of point number 1. Point number 1 gives you all the possible outcomes, right? It's how to think about all the possible outcomes. 2 and 3 are taking the more simplistic way that, oh, this can happen, that can happen, okay? So for example, point number 2, there could be reallocation of resources, right? There could be import substitution due to the fall in price of imports. So if, for example, your TOT improves, right? There could be import substitution because imports are relatively cheaper as compared to before. Okay, so we're explaining very, very simplistic cases. And then of course there could be lower unit cost of production as well due to the fall in import prices. So this will be TOT improved. Okay, TOT is improved. Right? 2B? 3. Changes in consumption patterns. So the first one is increase in consumer satisfaction due to greater consumption of imports and variety of goods and services as TOT improves. So again, we are taking the simplistic explanation that, oh, you know, because imports are relatively cheaper and we buy more than before. Okay, and then lastly, there could be fall in trade. This will be corresponding to this level. Right? If your TOT improve, it could also actually worsen your X minus N. Then it cause AD to fall, employment to fall, and so on. So I repeat. 2, 3, and this one, take the simplistic approach. We're telling you, oh, this might happen, that might happen. 1 is the core of this theory. 1 will tell you when will what happen. You get what I mean? So these are scenarios like, oh, maybe this, maybe that, this could happen, that could happen. 1 is the framework for us to decide, okay, how do we know when will what happen? Okay, so what is the most important? What is the framework? Right? When TOT changes, before I can tell you what's the outcome, you need to tell me whether XPI and NPI changes and why. Then I can tell you which of these other outcomes could it possibly be. Okay. TOCA, which we did a couple of pages back, is but one model of trade. What we mean by model of trade is, hey, we realize the world has been trading. Let's try to understand why. That's what Econs is about, right? The world is a certain way, we try to find reasons for it. So that's one model of trade. Oh, the world is trading like that because of TOCA, this makes sense, why do they behave this way? The demand and supply model of trade is another model of trade. So there's 2. You will learn 2 models of trade. And essay questions will come out that ask you, oh, explain the trading patterns between Singapore and her trading partners. That's a model of trade question, which is, what model of trade does Singapore follow? Okay, the truth is, all of these questions, right, for any country in the world, there's always 2 models of trade. Both models of trade are equally relevant. Why? TOCA shows us what we call inter-industry trade. Right? TOCA's explanation, actually, if you really think hard about it, is very simplistic. It's saying that if you're good at one thing, you produce it. You're not good at this other thing, let someone else produce it. You don't produce any of it at all. In other words, it's saying that, okay, for example, you export car, you import rice. This makes sense. So let's say the export car is Germany. This is Japan. So TOCA says, good, this makes sense. Right? You good at producing car and make car. You good at producing rice, you make rice. But we know that in real life, between Germany and Japan, you will see this happening. Right? Lexus is a Japanese car brand. Yeah, like what the hell? Right? TOCA went out the window, right? This is what we call intra means within, intra-industry trade. Inter is between, intra is within. So what we notice as we observe trading patterns around the world, trading pattern, when we talk about trade pattern, when you see this phrase trade pattern, we are asking 2 questions. Who and what? Who do you trade with and what do you trade in? Singapore's biggest trading partners, obviously Malaysia is one of them. ASEAN as a region is a very big deal for us, but we also trade heavily, of course, with US and China. Okay, those are our most major trading partners. So we need another model to explain intra-industry trade. Right? We're like, this makes no bloody sense, right? TOCA cannot explain everything, so we need both models. So the intra-industry trade model is the demand and supply model of trade. And it's actually really easy. The fundamental principle behind it is this. If P domestic is less than P world, that means domestically you produce this thing, it's cheaper than the world, right? What do? You export. If P domestic more than P world, we import. Simple? Logical? Yes, right? If your domestic price is lower than the world price, then you are inclined to sell more abroad, right? Than sell domestically because you make more as a producer. Right? If you have access to global markets, you just sell it abroad, you won't sell it locally. Not that much at least. Right? If you're a consumer and your domestic prices are higher than world prices, like in Singapore, right? A lot of people shop online now. That's why, do you ever go to Bugis Street? Have you ever been to Bugis Street in your life? You know what's in Bugis Street? There's a lot of cheap clothes. Huh? Yeah, there's a lot of cheap clothes, yeah. A lot of cheap clothes there. It didn't used to be like that, lah. I guess they had their own private sources outside. So, when I was like your age or a bit younger, people shop at Bugis Street, Far East Plaza, Hiran, right? You know Hiran now is Robinsons, right? You know what Robinsons is? So Robinsons is fully. Last time Hiran didn't look like that. Last time Hiran was a bit more like Bugis Street-ish on the top floors. So all these kind of shops, right, just basically died and they just disappeared because people can buy from Taobao. No one will freaking buy there anymore, right? It started in blog shops. Blog shops really started killing all these kind of shops because they got no differentiating factor. Right? Then eventually Taobao just coming and wipe off the market. So that's P domestic more than P world. You just import that. So in the setup, it's very simple. Okay, whenever you do this, draw 3 diagrams. I know some schools, right, don't draw this. So they just imagine a P world line, which is fine. I mean, it doesn't really make a big difference. Okay? But having the world market just shows you how the P world line comes about. So my whole point is very simple, right? If you got the world market gives you the world price. So the world market is all the demand in the world and all the supply in the world. Right? In the domestic market, if your P domestic is higher than P world, you are a net importer. Okay? So it's very simple. I mean, you just draw the line across. Right? You are net importer because at the world price there will be a shortage. Right? Consumers want to buy more, but producers want to produce less. So you have this shortage. So you need to import to plug the shortage. So it's not that you don't produce, you produce some, but you need imports to plug the shortage. Make sense? Then over here, exporter would be surplus, right? At the world price, more people want to sell than people want to buy. So you have a surplus. So you export the surplus. Okay? Now, first, let's talk about how we reconcile this with the TOCA. Right? Can this show what the TOCA suggests? Can. Because, right, if you have a comparative advantage in something and you have a lower op cost, we expect your cost of production to be lower, correct? If your cost of production is low, your supply is expected to be high, your domestic price is expected to be low. Can follow? So, yeah. This is what I'm talking about. Right? So it is somewhat consistent, right, with TOCA. If you have a comparative advantage in something, your op cost is lower, we expect your cost of production to be lower. If your cost of production is lower, your supply is higher, your domestic price will be lower. So you are more likely to be a net exporter. Okay? So it's this case. Now, where the similarities stop is this. You see, a country can have a CA in producing cars. Let's say Germany, right? But if people love their cars so much and their cars are so good and incomes are rising and taste and preferences are changing, the demand can rise over time. What you notice is that, now I become an importer. It's not because I don't have a CA in this. It's just because that there's too many people around the world that want my cars. Right? So I'm Germany, right? I'm exporting some BMW, yes, but I still have to import because not everyone's going to drive a BMW, right? And other people want my BMWs, so I import other cars, right? I have Toyotas, I have your Fiats, and your Renault, and all the Citroen and GM or whatever foreign car brands in the country, despite having a comparative advantage, because people want variety and choice and they want different cars. So it's all about the domestic price versus the world price. So this is a demand supply model. It's very easy. Any demand and supply factor can change P domestic. And as P domestic change relative to world price, it will change whether you import or export, which is very, very logical. Right? BMWs can fetch a higher price in a lot of foreign markets because it's seen as a marquee brand. Right? Okay? Can I say the framework? So it's really, really simple, right? If demand and supply are such that P domestic is lower than world, country is net exporter. And then if it's a P domestic higher than world, you become a net importer. And this model actually allows us to revisit something I talked about just now, which is unfair competition. Right? When you subsidize, even if you were like that to begin with. Okay, let me clean up the diagram a bit. I subsidize enough. What's this? You see that? I can tell you the net exporter. Okay? Then let me tell you how this is linked to dumping. Because there was a TYS question like that before, if your memory doesn't fail. You see, remember that supply equals to marginal cost, right? Demand equals to marginal benefit. So now, right, your P domestic is here, P dot. Right? What's your marginal cost? Your marginal cost is not here, you know. Your marginal cost is actually here. That's your true marginal cost. Because that's your true supply, without subsidies. So subsidies allow you to price, below your true marginal cost. Okay, I draw another one here for you so it's a bit clearer. Okay, when I subsidize, although my new price is here at Q1, right? This is not my marginal cost. My true marginal cost is here. Just to reiterate, you get pattern of trade questions, right? Trade patterns. You're gonna need both. They like to test you this for CSQ as well. So what they'll do is they'll give you a CSQ table. They'll show you by Germany and Japan. They'll give you a list of items that the countries export and import. Then they'll ask you, discuss the extent that TOCA can explain the pattern of trade shown in that table. So you're supposed to find things that are inter-industry and things that are intra-industry in that table. Okay? Then you say, TOCA supports the trading of these items. But it does not support what items, so that one need demand and supply model to explain. Okay? Very important, equal in importance to TOCA. It's just that TOCA gets tested more as a standalone part A. But the demand and supply model is key. Okay? You wanted to write down what I said, is it?
What table?
Okay, so I repeat. Okay, you can copy it on this page. Okay? What I was saying is the question they like to test, they give you a table, 2 countries, and a list of their exports and imports. Okay? And basically what they want to test you is whether you know how TOCA is reflected in those set of import and exports or not. So they're asking something like, discuss the extent that TOCA supports the pattern of trade between these 2 countries. Okay, so they give you 2 tables, right? 2 countries, the list of what they import and export from each other. Then they ask you whether TOCA can support the table. So what you need to look out for is what items represent inter-industry trade, what items represent intra-industry trade. So if they are both buying and selling the same category of things, that's intra. If they are buying and selling different categories of things, then that's inter. So most of the time your answer will be TOCA supports only to some extent. It does not support these items supported by demand and supply model of trade. And simple. Okay, now let me end here. This page is quite easy lah. Basically, it's just factors that limit free trade, right? Which is so why free trade might not necessarily occur as suggested by the 2 models. So the first big category is artificial barriers. We call it protectionism, which we will finish up next week. We'll basically do protectionism next week. That's where we talk about tariffs and subsidies and all of those stuff. Things that impede free trade. Okay? But there are other barriers, right? There are natural barriers to trade as well, 4 of them. Okay, the first one is high transport cost. Right? So actually there's a lot of repeat from the TOCA page, so it's not very hard. Right? Basically, high transport cost will be a natural barrier to trade. It makes trade unattractive because it eliminates a lot of the gains that you can potentially get from trade. Okay? Number 2 is lack of factor mobility. It makes specialization difficult, right? So you can't trade according to TOCA. Right? Limits. This tool limits specialization. Okay? Is it increasing cost of production at all costs, which is your concave PPC? So as we said, normal PPCs look like that. So it goes against your all cost table. So you cannot even do what the CA table tells you to do. Right? You cannot even specialize because your all cost is going to rise. How much can you specialize? How much can you produce? How much can you trade for? All of that gets curtailed. Right? And lastly, other market imperfections. The first one is market power. We talked about this. This is about pricing distortions. And then lastly, you have imperfect information. Right? Which is what? Imperfect information is basically the fact that, simply put, will be not everyone knows everything that you can export or import from everywhere in the world. It starts with that. Right? And then there are other things like, well, you might not know what your CA is. Right? You don't have a very clear. Of course, in real life, it's not so easy. It's not just, oh, I use this piece of land for MRT, means I can't use for what? There's like a lot of different users. Right? It's very difficult to do that kind of simplistic cost analysis of like, oh, you know, what should we specialize in, what are we giving up? It's not so straightforward, it's more multifaceted. Right? So not knowing all the available imports and exports, right? Not knowing your CA, not knowing what to specialize in, all of these things will hamper your ability to trade. Okay? Okay, I will